Welcome back to the Takeout. After a political party loses an election, there are recriminations and schisms. We're going to get to the schisms part right now because there's a schism, the Democratic Party, progressive and centrist, so-called. Adam Jentleson joins me now. He is the head of a new think tank, centrist defined, called Searchlight, right, Adam? Look over here.
That's right, Major.
You and I both know Searchlight is a town that Harry Reid was raised in, born in Nevada. So you, Adam Jentleson, are you the keeper of the Harry Reid legacy?
No, I would never try to claim that mantle. I think his legacy is far too big for any one person to claim that. But I would make a different claim, which is that, you know, Harry Reid would be purity tested out of today's Democratic Party.
He would?
Yes, I do believe that's true. You know, he was, as much as he's held up as a hero to many on the left these days for his sort of hardball leadership tactics, which is correct. And
correct,
was a
no
big
doubt.
Part of who he was when you covered Capitol Hill. We discussed this at length often. But, you know, he also was pro-life. He was pro-gun. At one point in his career, he favored the abolition of the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. So, yeah, I think those topics...
Pro-mining?
Pro-mining, very big. You know, people think gaming is the #1 industry in Nevada, but actually it's mining. So he's a big defender of the mining industry.
So he would be written out of the Democratic Party as it's constructed today by the groups.
That's right. I think those issues...
Who are the groups?
Well, the groups are any interest group that is narrowly focused on a single issue and pushes Democrats to take extremist positions on those issues. So not every organization is a group, but the way to know if you're a group or not is if you are pushing Democrats to take a maximalist position on whatever is the issue that you exist to advocate for.
Climate change, trans fall into those categories?
That's right, but not inherently. It is there are positions on all of those issues that have broad support. The difference is that marginal interval where a group says, let's go beyond what has broad-based support. Large majorities of Americans favor protecting trans people from all forms of discrimination, from bullying, from bodily harm. Where you start to lose people is when you get to the extremes of that issue, and it's the same thing on climate change. So the groups are the ones who push Democrats not to seek out the broad-based areas where we can achieve supermajority support across a range of issues. They're the ones who push Democrats to take the extreme version of all of those issues.
So what does a think tank like Searchlight do in this space?
We try to do two things. The first is to produce a lot of analysis and polling that shows where the American people stand on these issues, because polling has become an advocacy tool. A lot of the things that
not an information tool.
Not an information tool. That's exactly right. We poll to seek out the truth, not to advance a certain point of view. We'll put out polls that conflict with our policy issues.
So, meaning, if I hear you correctly, Adam, some groups might put the thumb on the scale of their own poll to get a result that backs their position.
That's exactly right. And
then they feed that to lawmakers to tell them, stick with us or else.
That's right. They issue polls that make their positions look a lot more popular than they actually are. And that's, you know, you can put their finger on the scale to actually cook the numbers. That's less common. Often what you do is you just cherry pick the results that see the light of day. So we're committed to transparency. Everything that we produce, we release publicly, even if it conflicts with some of our own policy positions.
Have you evolved? You were once lumped in with progressives.
Yeah, that's right. I think like a lot of people, I've gone through my own ideological journey. I started out most of my career working for centrist Democratic politicians like John Kerry, John Edwards, Harry Reid. And then I think between 2016 and 2020, with the rise of Trump and the rise of Bernie Sanders, there was a lot of questions about, is a different kind of politics possible? Is there this massive pool of voters that will turn out for people who take far left positions? And it turned out not to be the case. So I like to think of myself as somebody who takes new information into account and updates accordingly.
Did Democrats in the era of Trump say to themselves, he's so wrong, we must be right?
I think that's right. I think that they stopped thinking about what a positive, inspiring agenda could look like. Because one of the things Trump has done is he's presented, Trump is beating us, but he's still not winning over a large majority of the American people. He's winning over a pretty narrow majority. So there's still an opportunity for a party to come forward and to put forward an agenda that excites 60% of the American people. So we've fallen too easily into the reflexive opposition mode, and it's caused us to not think about what that positive agenda looks like that can marshal a supermajority.
Were you sick to your stomach watching 2024 play out?
Absolutely.
Go on.
Well, I think Biden should have dropped out. I think the president should not have run in the first place. I think there should have been a primary to determine who was the nominee. And then I think our nominee did not do a good job of drawing contrast with the past administration and meeting people's desire for change. So it was pretty hard to watch.
Searchlight Institute's Adam Jentleson, it's been a pleasure.
Great to see you, Major.
Thank you.